Hey, okay, so next we're doing question 46a. So question 46a gives you a preamble and then they ask you how a fall in investment, might lead to one type of unemployment, but a rise in innovation-based investment might lead to a different type of unemployment. So this is it's a 10 mark question. So 10 mark question is 10 plus 0. Okay, then let's try and identify the requirements. So requirement 1 would be the first one, right? So there's a fall in investment and how it leads to one type of unemployment. So when there's a fall in investments, it leads to one type of unemployment. Yeah. And requirement 2 would be how innovation-based investment will lead to another type of unemployment. So you learn that actually in terms of unemployment, there's two major causes, right? So the first one is cyclical unemployment. So that's the first case because cyclical unemployment is caused by a fall in AD. So cyclical is caused by a fall in AD. And the other major type of unemployment is structural unemployment that's caused by a mismatch of skills. So in the first case, when we have requirement 1, right, when there's a fall in investment, it will lead to cyclical unemployment. And then when you have a rise in innovation-based investment, it causes basically substitution of labor with capital because firms want to replace their workers and use machines instead. So then it creates a mismatch of skills. So then you have the structural unemployment as the second type of unemployment. Yeah. So this is your first requirement, your second requirement. Yeah. So let's get to the essay straight. So maybe in the intro we can say, hey, you know what exactly is unemployment? So unemployment is a percentage. Yeah, you want it to be as low as possible. So it's expressed as the number of unemployed workers divided by the size of the labor force. So the size of labor force is basically people who are willing and able to work. Yeah, and so the number, how you define someone who is unemployed is someone who is willing and able to work. They are actively seeking work. So they want to find a job. But unfortunately they cannot find a job, Okay, so maybe in the intro you can just tell people what exactly is unemployment. Then we're going to dive straight into requirement. Right. So the first requirement, we're going to say that a fall. Let me just underline this. A fall in investments will lead to cyclical unemployment. Yeah. Okay, so the way you want to explain a typical macro goal, right, is typically there's some kind of event happening. Something must happen, right, in order to create the macro problem. So we typically start with an event first. Maybe let's put it in red. This is something like a skill, right? So let's put it in red. So we typically start off with an event, right? And then when the event will influence some kind of component, but which in this case would be investment because the question tells us it's investment, and then the component, because investment is a component of AD, it will influence then AD. Yeah. After you do this, because it's an essay, right? So you want to make sure that you draw a diagram. Right, and then the last part is important. Okay, so the last part, after you draw the diagram, right, you need to link to the macro. Goal, and here is very important. Okay, you got to make sure that you explain the process. You cannot just say that, hey, unemployment is going to happen. So you got to tell me, labor is the derived demand. So when there's a fall in output, there's a decrease in the derived demand for labor. So this process, you must explain it. So in this case of unemployment, we're going to use terms like labor is a derived demand. Okay, so let's move on. So in this case, if you look at the preamble, they say that, you know what, you look at this, there's a pandemic. So they've given you the event, so that's great. So just take the pandemic. The event will be, you start off here, we start off with the pandemic, and we try to link to how the pandemic will cause investment to fall. So you need to explain how it decreases I. Okay, so let's unpack what goes on underneath here. So we can explain, right? So we can say, the pandemic created poorer business outlook. Yeah, the pandemic created poorer business outlook. Okay, then explain a bit more. So why did it create poorer business outlook? Because these lockdowns, you had lockdowns, and the fear of contagion, right? Fear of contagion. So these two things, they really affected the revenues, especially for firms who were serving the hospitality industry or the retail industry, right? Because no tourists are coming in, so all your hotels have no business. No one's going out to shop because of circuit breaker. So then all these will decrease the revenue in these sectors, right? So because of lockdowns and fear of contagion, so it's likely meant lower revenues, lower returns, especially for firms in the retail or hospitality sector. So these are your hotels and even F&B. Okay, maybe let's also bring in F&B. Yeah, F&B industries. Okay, so we know that our firms are rational. So when there's a decrease in the return on investment. So some of you call this EROR, expected rate of return. Then rational investors will cut back on investments. Yeah, so rational investors decrease their investment expenditure. Okay, so something like this. So by virtue of you doing this, then now actually where you are somewhere here. Right, so you finished, so you start out with an event, right, and then now you have moved all the way, you finish explaining the component. So the next step would be to link it to AD, right? So the next step is to make sure you link it to AD, and then make sure you draw the diagram after that. Okay, so let's move here first, let's go on. So then, because next step would be to link it to AD, so because I is a component of AD, then AD would decrease from AD0 to AD1. Okay, then we're going to draw a diagram. Yeah, so next step will be to draw the diagram. Yeah, so draw the diagram. So GPL is on the y-axis, RMY is on the x-axis. So just maybe give it a bit more leeway, just have a bit more runway here. So just put it here, more runway. Because you want to decrease unemployment you want to make sure there's a lot of unemployment, so you just give it a bit more runway so that when you draw it's easier. Okay, so AS is like that. So you start here, then you just go all the way here. Okay, so why not Y1? This one P not 2. Okay, so now so you draw the diagram, then now you're here, so you've completed drawing the diagram. So the next step is to make sure that you explain the process. Yeah, the macro goal here is cyclical unemployment, so you want to use the technical terms related to cyclical unemployment. Okay, I'm gonna write this in blue so you know, because of many people mess this up. Yeah, so next step we explain the process, the cyclical unemployment process. So what happens how come when AD falls, people start to lose their jobs? Okay, so we're going to say that when AD decreases from AD0 to AD1, then it leads to an unplanned unplanned accumulation or increase of stocks and inventories. So suddenly the firm see, hey, how come all my things not selling? Yeah. So then the firm will call up the factory and tell the factory, hey, hey, why don't you just stop producing? So firms would decrease their output, and they hire less factors of production from households. So households are the owners of factors of production. Yeah, so you just hire less factors of production from households. Then we all know this. So labor is a derived demand, because labor equals derived is a derived demand. So you don't demand labor for its own sake. You demand it as a means to produce something else. That's why it's called a derived demand. Yeah. So then there'll be a decrease in the demand for labor. Yeah, which means actually by right, wages are supposed to go down, right? But then the problem here is that because wages are sticky downwards, so they kind of refuse to go down. Yeah, because who wants to accept a pay cut, right? So what firms do instead is that firms lay off workers instead of decreasing wages. So then as a result, you see workers will be retrenched. Workers are retrenched, and it leads to cyclical or demand deficient. Yeah, both terms are interchangeable. Demand deficient, unemployment. Okay, so then we're done. Yeah, so you start with an event, link it to the component, get to AD, draw the diagram, and then explain the process. Yeah, so then we would finish requirement 1. Okay, finish requirement 1, which is how a fall in investment might lead to one type, which is cyclical unemployment. Okay, so that's R1 out of the way. Let's go to R2. Okay, let's check R2 again. Rise in innovation-based investment and how it leads to the other type of unemployment. Okay, R2. Let me flip my notes. Okay, so R2 says that when there's a rise in innovation-based investment, it leads to structural unemployment. Okay, so the way you want to explain structural unemployment is a very unique macro goal because it doesn't rely on ADS. Yeah, so this one, there's no ADS. Yeah. So unlike growth, unlike cyclical unemployment, unlike inflation, there's ADS stuff. Structural unemployment, there's no ADS stuff. Yeah. So the way you want to explain structural unemployment, actually, there's also 2 steps. Yeah. So the first step, right, would be you need to explain to me how the worker loses his job first. Yeah. So you need to tell me, okay, workers in this sector are, they kena the innovation-based investment, then they will lose their job. So you got to explain to me how this innovation-based investment will cause the worker to lose his job. Then the next step is make sure that you wanna use technical terms. So there's only one technical term relevant for structural unemployment, and that's the technical term mismatch. You must use this word, yeah? Mismatch of skills. Cannot stress this enough, okay? You must use the mismatch of skills. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to explain how the worker loses his job first, okay? So let's explain how the worker loses his job. Okay, a rise in innovation-based investment leads to to tech advancements. Okay, so what exactly is happening here is that over time, right, you would find machines that are increasingly able to replace what the worker is doing, especially for repetitive and low skilled jobs where the machine can replace you. Okay, so then if that's the case, then certain Singapore firms may choose to adopt these these new technologies and automate their processes. Okay, so one good example I always use is self checkout counters. Okay, self checkout counters. Okay, let me just check something. Okay, my pencil is fine. Okay, so when you use self checkout counters or you use maybe online reservation systems, then previously the workers who were for example cashiers, or they were in charge of the reservation system, over time you'll need less and less of them, right? So actually what's great about automation is that it reduces human error. Yeah, so that's why firms like to use it, and then it reduces the reliance on manual labor. Yeah, automation equals reduce human. Okay, sorry, my pencil is not working. Reduce human, go write slowly, error, and reduce reliance on manual labor. Reduce the reliance on manual labor. So then firms would choose to replace labor by substituting it with capital in an effort to cut costs, right? Because they want the most efficient way, so they're going to substitute labor with capital. So firms substitute labor with capital, right, in an effort to cut costs. Okay, so you must tell me how the workers are laid off. So that's how you explain it. Yeah. So first step, you wanna explain how the worker loses his job first. Okay, then you wanna make sure you use technical terms. So remember I told you the main technical term is the term mismatch of skills. So then let's use it, but use it in a way that makes sense. Yeah, don't just plug and play the word. Make a sentence that makes sense. Yeah. So workers laid off in these industries cannot, oh my god, my pencil is slow, cannot move into other industries. And the reason why is because there's a mismatch between the skills they possess and the skills required by other industries. Yeah, so make sure you must use the word, just use the crayon. We really want to stress this. Yeah, so there's a mismatch between the skills they possess and the skills required by other industries. So finally we get to our destination, that it creates structural unemployment. Okay, so roughly what's the structure of the essay? Let's use green. R1 would be, you need to tell me how a decrease in I decreases AD and increases cyclical cyclical unemployment. And R2, you need to tell me how innovation-based investment leads to a mismatch of skills and creates structural unemployment. Yeah, that's it for this essay.